Is the mind-body connection real? That's a question someone asked of me recently, and the answer is a categoric yes. I think people were a bit more sceptical in the past, but now we have so much scientific data. We know categorically that even your thoughts and emotions fiddle around with your brain chemistry. They cause changes in brain chemistry. We know that expectation and belief and imagination, visualization, physically shape our brain networks and also cause physical changes inside the body. I suppose some better questions is, why do we have a mind-body connection, and how does it work, and can we use it in a positive way? So let me address the first question, the reason why we have a mind-body connection. Let me talk specifically about the reason why your brain doesn't distinguish between real and imaginary, or doesn't distinguish all that much between real and imaginary. The answer to that lies back in our distant evolutionary past. Suppose one of our ancient ancestors heard rustling in a bush. Now, the brain had to react very quickly, you know, in terms of fight or flight, very quickly to whether that was real danger, maybe there's a tiger in the bush, whether that was real danger, or whether they were just imagining that it could be, say, a tiger in the bush. So evolution favoured brains that didn't really distinguish between real and imagined danger, because if it was real danger, then your life is saved. If it was, you know, turned out to be a false alarm, then it's not really any big deal. So evolution actually favoured there be not really any significant difference between real and imaginary, because the body had to react quickly, regardless of whether it was real or imagined. So how does it work? Well, it works in the sense that, say, visualization anyway, when you repetitively imagine something, then you activate more or less these same brain networks as doing the thing. Let me give you an example of that. So researchers at Harvard, led by Alvaro Pascal Leon, a few years ago, got volunteers to play a sequence of notes on a piano for a period of time on 5 consecutive days. They had their brain scanned every day. While they did that, a separate group of people didn't physically play piano notes, they imagined them instead. It's called kinesthetic imagery, where we imagine what that would be like to physically play the notes. And they also did that, they imagined it for the same period of time on those 5 consecutive days, and brain scans showed the changes in the brain were the same for those who played the notes with their fingers as those who played the notes in their imagination. And now that phenomena, that the brain doesn't really distinguish it at that level, at least, between real and imaginary, has obvious physical effects, because we now know that imagining, say, lifting weights makes us stronger. Studies show that people who've had a stroke who visualize movement, you know, say they've got impairment on one particular side and they visualize moving that, say it's the right arm, for example, they visualize moving the right arm repetitively in addition to physiotherapy, they recover faster than those who do physiotherapy alone. So you've got physiotherapy is that good, but add visualization onto physiotherapy and it's significantly better. And again, the reason for that is the brain isn't really distinguishing real from imaginary. So we're working out the brain networks for that imagined movement as if you really were actually doing the movement. You know, most elite athletes now use visualization in some way to enhance their performance. You know, I'm not an elite athlete, but I do like to play tennis, and I have used visualization to improve particular shots that I play. So it's well known in the world of sports. We also know that visualizing the immune system doing something actually enhances the immune system's ability to do that. Let me give you an example of that. So women receiving treatment for breast cancer, all of them got the same treatment. So it was surgery, radiotherapy, chemotherapy and hormone treatment. But half of the women supplemented the physical treatment, the medical treatment they were receiving, but with visualization, where they visualized their immune systems literally destroying the cancer. And it turned out in the study that their immune system responded much stronger than the women who got the medical treatment alone. So again, you got medical treatment was that good, but supplementing it with visualization seemed to enhance what the immune system was doing. So there's loads and loads of research now that categorically prove that there is such a thing as the mind-body connection. Maybe 20 years ago, people would be, you could maybe not have as much evidence and people might feel justified by asking, is there a mind-body connection? But now that, there's so little skepticism about it now because we have, vast amounts of data and proof of that. So how do we use it? Well, let's suppose, I'll give you the example of sports. Let's suppose you play a sport and you want to get better at a particular movement. Let me use the example of tennis because it's familiar to me. Let's suppose you wanted to improve your forehand, then maybe watch a pro and watch what it was supposed to be like, so that you've got a mental map, or what's called a mental representation, and then imagine yourself doing that repetitively over and over and over again. Like you were doing sets of reps at the gym, but you're doing sets of mental reps, and maybe every day or every other day for a week or two or longer than that, and then notice how that affects your performance. People who are recovering from stroke, what they actually do. So if you're doing some form of rehabilitation, then what people tend to do is imagine repetitively again moving the impaired limb. So one of the things in some of the stroke research they have them doing is imagining, say, picking up a cup and taking a drink and putting it back down, imagining lifting the cup, taking a drink and putting it back down, and it's repetition of that sort of thing. People who have medical conditions actually imagine the process of illness turning into wellness, and it's called, they create a mental representation of illness and turn it into a mental representation of wellness, where you're just representing the thing mentally, and they just do it over and over and over again. As long as the end product is wellness, then you're doing it right, because 10 people might start and end it in a different way, by visualizing a different process, because we'll imagine things in our own way. But as long as the end product is your way of representing wellness, then you are actually doing it correctly. Let me give you a couple of examples. Sometimes people imagine parts of the body or that look sickly in their imagination as if they're inside the body, and they imagine cleaning it and maybe feeding it nutrients and restoring it to good health. I mean, for example, a person that I recall imagined cells that looked sickly, and imagine giving them some nutrition, the green shot, and then cleaning them, just gently cleaning them with a sponge of healing fluid, and turned this sickly grey thing into a lovely, healthy, bulbous pink cell. Even people with mental health conditions, I remember a gentleman said that he felt broken. So he visualised his brokenness. He was struggling with depression, and he visualised his brokenness as a mirror that he used to love in his former house that had fallen off the wall and broken on the floor. He visualised brushing up all the shards, putting them in a cauldron, melting them by putting a fire under it, and then pouring the melted liquid mirror back into the original frame, blowing it to cool it down and hanging it back on the wall. And what he'd done is he'd taken brokenness and he turned it into wholeness. So people get quite creative with visualizations as well. I remember a guy a few years ago imagined just pouring acid onto some verrucas that he had, and he just did it every single day, and within 3 or 4 weeks they'd all completely gone, despite the fact he'd tried other things in the past that hadn't seemed to work. So the key strategy using visualization in this way is you take some way of mentally representing illness and you turn it into a mental representation of wellness. Or that's visualizing the process. Some people just go right to the outcome, and just whenever they think about the thing, the condition, they just picture it in their imagination. And when I say picture it, some people are good at visualization, some people are really good at it. You don't have to be the greatest visualizer. That's why I sometimes use the word imagine rather than visualize, because everyone imagines in their own way. And even if imagining for you means just stating words, your brain still understands what you're meaning by it, so you don't have to see in high definition pictures. So whatever you want to use visualization for, give it a go for a couple of weeks and see how you get on.